Why protecting unions and instituting codetermination are vital. Corruption within the union leadership is part of the reason for the fall of unions. Corporate manipulation is the other part. I've worked for places where the union was extremely weak and in bed with company management. The representation was so poor, it caused me to hire my own lawyer when I was fired for poor performance after being injured on the job in Alabama. I sued and won a settlement for thousands of dollars. Union's leadership has been charged with embezzlement. They have been tied with the mob or entirely controlled by them. All these problems are the reason that having only unions for the representation of labor isn't enough. Unions need a new role. Labor needs a real voice as stakeholders. Labor's status must be changed from the feudalistic classification of stock, or simply a means of production, and given the proper designation of stakeholder. They must be elevated to their proper station and given a seat at the stakeholders' table, where they should have always been. Ever since feudalism, and going back to the dawn of agriculture, labor has been looked at by elitists as part of the means of production, or stock. This selfish, manipulative, and unnatural situation is an ancient one. It is a primitive notion and is past due for abandoning. Labor, in reality, is just as much a stakeholder as the owners of the means of production. Without labor, their stock is simply material gathering dust. The vital force of labor is required for the production of all goods and services. The extraction of value from the production created by labor is vital for the creation of profit for the capitalist economy. Without labor, there is no production. So when an owner of stock wished to transform their stock into products and services that they might turn a profit from, they must always seek out labor's force for the transformation. Labor, when they consider lending their force to that endeavor, must make some calculations. The owners of stock calculate how much to pay labor for their services from the surplus value created by labor. Labor calculates how much they are willing to accept because they have to pay the cost for the materials required for their survival. Both the holders of the stock and the owners of labor must bear a certain level of trust in each other, one trusting that labor will render a quality value, and the other trusting that they will be properly compensated. That trust was broken by the holders of the stock with the use of violence and force of arms long, long ago. The history of that broken trust is evident in the rise of monarchies, feudalism, and slavery. Because the holders of stock broke the trust and are not likely to repair that trust as long as they don't have to, labor has to force their hand. Labor has to do it now. Merely protecting the formation of unions is not going to work. It didn't work in the past, and it's not going to work now. There is already an adversarial relationship between management and labor. Unions simply institutionalize the adversarial relationship with temporary contracts. The forces that broke the trust remain intact and unaltered. The modern incarnation of that adversarial force is the corporate boardroom. Corporations have their roots in monarchies. Look back to the age of exploration, when royal charters were passed out to individuals who with corporations controlled vast swaths of the globe. The ancient corporations used human beings as stock and a means of production which they extracted all the value possible at the expense of human beings, that expense sometimes costing them their very lives. The human being's labor was stolen. The labor value is still being stolen. All of that means that labor needs better tools, or at the very least, to use the tools they already have to change this ancient disparity. They must be given an equal voice with the holders of stock. That's where codetermination comes in. There must be a partnership between labor and the holders of stock. The trust must be restored. If labor has an equal station at the decision-makers' table with the holders of stock, then the trust can be made whole. The adversarial relationship would turn into a more cooperative relationship. The ratio must be no less than 50-50. If the ratio is weighed in management's favor, the rights of labor would be in danger as they are today. I believe that unions can play a vital part in the new paradigm. The unions can still organize labor, but with a focus on the corporate boardroom into which labor has been elevated. When the owners of stock make their votes for the members of the corporate boardroom, at the same time, labor should be voting for half of the members to represent them in the boardroom. Unions could work at organizing the labor vote. Because of past union corruption and cooperation with corporations to undermine labor rights, there must be safeguards in place. There must be heavy penalties and disbarment for any union persons who break the new trust between labor and management. Codetermination isn't a new thing. It is an idea that has been in force for over 100 years in some other nations. Nations like Germany have codetermination. The German economy is one of the strongest economies of the European Union. How exactly would codetermination help labor in the United States of America? Here is a possible scenario. Codetermination is firmly in place. At the corporate boardroom table, the decision-makers' table, sit the representatives of the holders of the stock and the owners of labor with a ratio of 50-50. One of the stockholder reps says to the others, "I propose we cut labor's wages and benefits in order to enable the corporate CEOs to receive more compensation." Immediately, the labor rep side of the corporate boardroom would object to such a thing. They would warn the stockholder side of the table that any such of a policy isn't going to be allowed, then have to solidly put their foot down and threaten them with labor's ultimate power. The ultimate power which laborers own is the denial of their services. The denial of profit generated by that denial of the force of labor to transform stock into products. The threat of a general strike must be welded as labor's ultimate weapon. The general strike is a force that is feared by the holders of stock. The awesome power of the denial of labor has been made evident by the coronavirus pandemic. I point to the start of the precautions made to protect the populace. Labor was asked by the government to stay home in an effort to stop the spread of the virus. Almost immediately, the stock market crashed. When the corporate profits suffered, corporate-bought politicians started trying everything they could think of to get labor back to work. Corporate profits were at risk, so they manipulated and connived without regard for labor. Labor can cause the same thing to happen without a pandemic as the cause. The force of will and solidarity between labor to deny their precious and vital services would do the same thing. The oligarchs would squirm and the stock market would crash. Labor can bring the entire economy to its knees simply by staying home. Labor must be elevated. Labor must be stationed at the corporate table of the decision makers. There can be no less than a 50-50 ratio in this. Labor must be made aware of their awesome power, the denial of their services with a general strike. Even if labor is denied codetermination, a general strike. That general strike must include a majority of the members of labor. It must include not only the denial of their services, but also the denial of their participation in the economy. That would mean no purchasing of goods and services, no use of energy products, the denial of any activity that puts any profit into the corporate coffers and/or small business profit too. There would be a cost for labor in a general strike. Corporate power would attempt through force or guile to get the owners of labor to stop striking. They might try to wait labor out because they have more material resources. Labor cannot allow them to crush their general strike with any method. Labor would have to stick together in solidarity. They would have to support each other by sharing what they have. I swear to you, if labor stands strong in solidarity in a general strike, corporate power would submit to the will of labor. This is true democracy in the workplace. Codetermination is the only way labor will get a proper voice in industry and government. Codetermination will cause equality to be had by all labor, no matter the color of their skin, their religious beliefs, or any other factor corporate power currently uses as a weapon to divide labor and keep power and wealth all for themselves. These are ideas that I believe will cause a new and better situation to be created for all of our people. If it isn't had, labor can look forward to further erosions of their rights and standard of living. They can look forward to the continuance of the neo-feudal system they cope with today. Unions are simply not enough.